You're listening to On Fire Concerts Artist Interview Series with your host, Ron Johnson.
And we're in California, we're out of money, we're out of gasoline, and he said, we're out of bologna. and I remember how that really scared me. I thought, what in the world are we going to do? And he said, we're going to go over here and we're going to get out of this car, we're going to walk over there. And he said, I've already prayed about it. He said, we're going to see if we can get a job picking oranges. And we had never even seen an orange growing on a tree. So he walks over and we all do. My mother, my brother, and my dad, and I. And my dad said he was weighing, there was a guy at a wagon, he was weighing these oranges in. And he was handing the money back when they weighed the oranges in. And so he waited till he got through taking care of those people. He said, sir, are you hiring any pickers today? He said, yes, sir, all we can get. Pitched in 2 kids' bags and 2 adult bags. Because they didn't want the oranges dragging the ground.
Right.
Shorter bags. So we picked oranges till it was so dark you couldn't see the trees, much less the oranges on. And so the guy said, he said, y'all done real good today. He said, would you like to pick again tomorrow? And my dad said, man, we'd like to pick as long as we can. And he said, we're looking 3 or 4 more weeks in this grove. He said, I'd like to stay and pick all the way through it. And we did make a few bucks, you know. So my dad asked him if he could pitch a tent. He told me, he said, we're in here from Oklahoma. We don't have a place to stay, so we got a tent with us. We just pitch a tent in this orange grove, stay you through if you can. He said, man, just find a place to where we pull trees out, set it up. He said, just don't start an open fire, set the whole place on fire. So we were rich enough to have a Coleman 2-burner cook stove. We had a Coleman lantern hung out in the middle of the tent, so we set up. So anyway, we wound up staying there and made enough money to build a house trailer. So he did that. He bought a frame off a wreck truck, another junkyard. He already had experience with junkyards. And we built a house trailer. And I've still got some pictures of that. But anyway, that's the kind of start I had in my life. And I'd always dreamed about stuff, you know. And my brother and I both learned to play guitars as soon as we could reach around the neck one. My dad, driving down the road, he taught us how to sing harmony. And so we sing pretty good. We sung with him in church. And that gave him an edge on most preachers because we pick a little bit and sing a little bit. And my brother was 2 years older than me, so he was quite a bit taller than me. And he stood him on a grape crate. They were made out of wood then. They shipped all fruit in wooden boxes. And he put me on an apple crate because it was about this tall, and the grape crate was about that tall, but made up for the height. So we stand up there and sing harmony with my dad in the churches, you know. And we done that until we sung with him until we was 15, 16 years old, I guess.
And traveling across the country, you know, like you said, 3rd grade, 4th grade, whatever it was, and you didn't have YouTube, and you didn't have Nintendos.
No, our deal, like I said, was riding down the road. He'd teach us how to sing parts, and he said, now, Jay, here's what you need to sing, and he'd sing it for me. He did know all the parts.
Right.
And then he'd tell me to sing it back to him. And, you know, if I missed a note, he'd say, okay, that 3rd word you missed, that should go a little higher, a little lower. And he wasn't a teacher. He had an 8th grade education.
Right.
Of course, in Oklahoma at that time, he did have a teaching certificate. He could taught school if he wanted to with an 8th grade education. And he never did. I mean, he started preaching when he was fairly young.
But kids nowadays, you wouldn't have...
Oh, they got Nintendo games.
Yeah, I did.
In our car right now, we've had that car now a year or so, and there's 2 televisions in the back. We've never turned. I don't even know how to turn them on, and I don't care when we didn't need that.
When I was a kid, I mean, like I said, I'm just 64, but I remember my mother and my grandmother even when she would watch us. Our games or excitement was they locked the front door till you. We'll let you in when we want you.
Yeah, you play outside till we're ready.
You make your own games.
Well, that's what we did too, and you know, looking back on that, and looking at today's teenagers, they worry me a little bit. They got a cell phone in their pocket. They got all kinds of electronic games they play, some of which not too
not too good.
Yeah, they probably shouldn't be playing that.
Right.
But and the standards are a lot lower now. Like language, you know, if you said a heck or a darn, I mean, get that old tail ready for a razor strap.
That's right.
And that stuff is absent from the home anymore. And of course, we have one son, and I don't remember ever getting a belt to him, but we taught him how you act and what to do.
And Jay, I think the world of. He's always been good to me.
Yeah, you know, he's never drank, never smoked, and I thank the Lord for that. I've never told him not to. In fact, when he was a young kid and everybody was smoking, I said, "Man, I wish you wouldn't smoke.
Yeah.
If you feel like you got to, don't sneak around and hide, do the crap." I didn't like that.
It's like my dad used to tell us: if you don't lie to me, because if you lie to me, I'm gonna catch you.
That's too offensive.
He said, if you don't want me to know something, just tell me it ain't none of my business. He said, you might still get in trouble. But so you were in when y'all were in California, and I may be jumping ahead, but if I am, just tell me. When you got into the radio?
Well, what I actually the radio programs I had were in Crossett, Arkansas, where I graduated from high school.
I thought it was
well, what happened? We went to California in '44. We stayed there for 7 years. My dad held revivals all up and down California. Then he took a church. There'd been a church there, and the building was standing there, and the old parsons were standing there, and they hadn't had a pastor in years and hadn't had church there. But they wrote my dad a letter and asked him if he'd consider going there and trying to revive that church. So back then they prayed about everything they done. They didn't say, "Send me your benefit package and let me look that over and then we'll pray about it. See if we can feel the Lord guiding us." They'd base it on how much a week you're going to pay them. If you got 2 new suits at Christmas time and if they paid your car note. But that stuff wasn't even consideration back then.
It was just if we felt led to be there.
You actually prayed about it, and if you felt the Lord was leading you and that you could do work for Him, you went. If you didn't do it. So he felt like that's what they should do. And he had bought this bus from Warner Brothers Pictures. And we was living in this trailer we built. The trailer was 8 by 20, but the tent was 10 by 10, so we gained a little square footage. And we thought we died one day moving that trailer. And these people let us park it behind their house. And they had a bathroom on their back porch, and we shared it with them. They got up from 7 to 8. They had it from 8. We had it. And that was scheduled. They ran on, and we did too. And we met them at church as good folks, and they wouldn't take any money for it. They just let us do it. So when we left there, we left the trailer sitting there, and they rented it out. So they had a little rental property. So it come out good for everybody. But he built a motorhome inside that bus. And that's what we left California, and that's what my brother and I learned to drive on. Was that old 35 Chevrolet bus. And when we got to Arkansas, he was trying to build that church. So he took all that luxurious motorhome fitting out of there, put benches down both sides and one down the middle. And we could haul 28 people in it. So my brother and I, we didn't have a driver's license. I was 13, he was 15. And we drove that thing anywhere. And we'd drive around the neighborhood, just pick people up and bring them to church. And we did that the whole time we lived there. Then he got that church going pretty good, went to Monticello, Arkansas, and done the same thing. And went to Crossett, done the same thing. And that's where we lived when I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And that was in 1953. But I was picking pretty good then. My brother was too. But he was out of school and he went back to California. And I had a little band, and we played for little old events around town and all that kind of stuff. And we played at all the high school meetings where all the school came in the gym and you sat there and played. And this guy just bought the radio station right next door to the school. And a guy from New York had moved down there and bought that radio station. he had a son that had enrolled in school in Crossett. And just a day or two after he came there, we played in one of these assembly programs at school. All the students were in there, 900 and something of them. And so he goes home, tells his dad, he said, man, there's a guy over there played music today, and he was really good. Had a band in there, and it sounded good. He said, really? He said, well, I'm thinking about putting some live music on the radio. And he said, tell him to come over here and talk to me. So I rode the school bus school, and it's 7 miles. If you missed the bus, you're out to the side of the road and you hitchhike. But people would pick you up then.
Yeah.
That's before all this robbing and killing started with hitchhikers. But anyway, he come and looked me up the next day and said, man, my dad wants you to stop over there. He wants to talk to you about a live radio program. And that was the only radio station in Southeast Arkansas. And so, boy, as soon as school was out, man, I took off over. And I did miss the bus. But one of the guys that played with me in that band, his daddy was a preacher too. He was a Church of God preacher, and he had Church of God. My dad had an Assembly of God church there. And his daddy had a car, and he could get it anytime he wanted. So from the radio station, I called him. They had a telephone. I called him, and I said, man, can you get your dad's car and pick me up at the radio station, give me a ride? And he said, yeah. He said, what are you doing at the radio station? I said, I'm over here trying to get us a place to play. So anyway, Julian Hayes was the guy's name at that radio station. He said, man, my son was he said he was knocked out with the way y'all played and sung. He said, act like a professional band, you know. And he said, what's the name of your group? And I said, oh, we don't have a name, you know. I said, we just play at school and little events every now and then at the park, you know. Somebody called wants to come over and play, and we do. I said, we play and sing church more than we do anything. And he said, well, I tell you what, he said, can you play 30 minutes? And I said, Lord, yeah, we can do that easy. And he said, well, be over here Saturday ready to play at 12 noon. And he said, I'll come on and I'll read the news for 5 minutes. And then he said, y'all be ready to play. Then he said, I'm going to ask people to let us know if they'd like to hear that every Saturday. And if we get enough mail, he said, I'll have you come in here and play every Saturday. And he said, I don't pay you to do it, but I give you the time and you can sell spots. And the money you get for selling spots, you can keep. And I said, how much you get for spots? And he said, oh, you can get $5 or $10 a piece for them real easy. Now, this was 1952. So all I heard was 10.
10, yeah.
And so I told him, I said, we'll be here Saturday. So I called them boys. And one of them was Lloyd Brown, the one who his daddy was Church of God preacher. And so I called him first because he did have access to that car. So if I couldn't get my dad's car, we had 2 shots in the car. So I made sure he was there. So anyway, we wound up. That Saturday we was over there, man, and we was ready to pick. And I'd noticed he'd pick up that phone. It was a little glass window, and he was in there, and he was the owner of the station. He was the engineer. He was a receptionist.
He did it all.
He done it all. And the station was that little control room over there. There's one big room twice as big as this, with an old carpet on the floor. Just ugly old carpet. One microphone standing up in the middle and an upright piano against that wall over there. That was the studio. Egg crates all over the ceiling, all the walls. That was your soundproofing. And anyway, we done that show, and after it was over, he told me, he said, boy, I've been getting phone calls. And he said, I didn't even ask for phone calls. I asked him to write, send a card, letter in, let us know what you think about it, and if you'd like to hear them every Saturday. So he got a bushel basket full of mail. And almost all of it was saying, yeah, they'd like to hear it. So for 2 years, I had a radio program on that station. And at first, you know, my daddy was Assembly of God preacher. They were Pentecostal folks, and everybody liked to call us Holy Rollers, which used to pee me off. And I had more fights over being called a Holy Roller than I did anything else my whole school lifetime. But anyway, they called my dad a Holy Roller. That's what made me mad.
Yeah.
They called me one, I didn't care. and they did praise the Lord a little bit. Now they got praise and worship. Don't sound like praise or worship to me, but that's just my own little bit.
Yeah,
But they did practice a little feeling in their services, and maybe were a little exuberant on occasion. But I didn't like the name Holy Roller, and it bugged me when people calls that. But anyway, some of the people in the church took offense to my dad letting me sing in the church and still do that program. They called it the devil's music because I sing in country music.
yeah.
And so I went and told old Julian Hayes, the owner of the station, I said, man, I've got a problem. It may end up me having to quit this program because I don't want to affect my dad's church. You know, his ministry had a good thing going there, you know. And I told him what the deal was, and he said, well, he said, I don't even understand your story. He said, we're a Jewish family. We got, you know, we believe in God, but we got a whole different set of things than your Assembly of God people do. But he said, would it help or make a difference if I gave you a Sunday morning program singing church music? And I said, shoot, it might. I was thinking about the $10, you know, for those spots.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a Sunday morning program doing gospel stuff. And I was raised on normal gospel songs. I knew tons of those. So I had 2 radio programs my last 2 years of high school across Arkansas.
And people no longer, it didn't matter then.
It didn't make any difference. And half that mail was from church people that didn't think it was right singing devil's music on the radio. And anyway, that kind of mixed me up a little bit. But I went out and I never failed to sell a $10 spot. I couldn't do with 6 programs.
Right.
But I never went to call on anybody that didn't buy one of those spots. And I had 2 car dealers, and I was green as gourd. I didn't know about it. I had to write my own script, what I was going to say about them. And I said the same thing about both of them car dealers. Best car dealer in the southeast Arkansas. You can't get a better deal anywhere you can get here. And I read the same thing
for the other one.
His competitor. So Julian called me in and he said, you might ought to review, you know, what you're writing on these people. He said, they're great ads. He said the same thing about 2 guys as direct competitors. So you need to think up something different to say about them. Don't say either one of them are the best they are because you got 2.
Right.
So he gave me a little lesson on selling advertising. So I got an advertising lesson. I got a lesson on church people opposing the devil's music. I got a lesson on being there on time, ready to pick and sing. When the minute hit on that clock, you had to be picking. So I learned a whole bunch right at that radio station. But I was the biggest tither in the Cloverdale Assembly of God Church in Crossett, Arkansas for 2 years because I gave my pickers $5 a piece, and I kept the rest of that money. I had 2 programs. I was selling 6 spots each. That's $60 for each one. I was taking in $120, and I was giving my pickers $10 a piece out of that. There's 3 of them. So I was making more money than my dad ever thought about making pastor in that little church. In fact, I've still got a logbook of all the money he made through 1948. And it was $4 or $5 a week.
Right.
But you get a hamburger for a nickel and Coke for a nickel. And if you went out to eat, that's what you went out to eat.
Yeah.
You wasn't thinking about a ribeye steak or a king cut prime rib. I didn't know there was one. My dad called bologna round steak.
Yeah.
So we thought when they fried bologna, we was eating some steak. We didn't really think that, but I mean, it was.
So was it in Arkansas, or I remember talking to you in the past, when did you meet, or where did you meet Johnny Cash? Because talking about Arkansas.
Well, I graduated from high school in Crossett, Arkansas in 1953. And this is another thing, you know, I don't brag on anything I've ever done. I thank God for everything I've ever done because I think he led my footsteps without me even asking him. He knew where I ought to be and what I ought to be doing.
And that's still true today.
And I believe I still go with that. He put me in places where I met people I wasn't necessarily trying to be. I never set out to say I had some goals. I started to tell you a while ago, I had a few things I wanted, like I wanted a diamond ring because I liked when I seen somebody with a diamond ring, that impressed me.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted a Gibson guitar because we had old cheap guitars, most of them no names. Got a K, we finally thought we'd arrived when we got that. And that wasn't a lot better than we had. I wanted me a Gibson guitar, diamond ring, and I always dreamed about a Cadillac car. And I said, if I can get them things, I'll be happy in my life. When I got that radio program, first thing I done is I bought a diamond ring, a quarter of a carat, for $60 at Trammell Jewelry Store in Crossett, Arkansas. I had a job at the Piggly Wiggly store too. When I had the radio program,
Right.
I walked from the school to the Piggly Wiggly every day, and I passed Trammell Jewelry Store. I stopped and looked in that window. One day, Mr. Trammell come out, and he said, and they, by then they knew who I was because I had a radio program. And he said, Jay, I see you every day. Stop and look in that window. What are you looking at? And I said, I like that ring right there. And he said, you make any money off that radio program? I said, yeah. And he said, do you get paid to do that radio program? I said, yeah, I get paid to do it. He said, can you pay $5 down, $5 a week? And I said, yeah. He said, well, come on in, we'll fit it up for you. So I bought me a diamond ring when I was in the 11th grade. So that was my first dream come true. Then my brother and I saved $quarters and bought us a Gibson ES 125 guitar. And by then he was playing a banjo and an accordion. So I was playing the guitar.
Right.
So basically, both of our together, we bought it. But it was mine, I played it. So I had a guitar and had a diamond ring. It was a bigger step to get that Cadillac. But I did get one. And it was pink and white, and it was a Fleetwood, had black and white interior. And I bought clothes to match it. I was working in, making me some money after I graduated from high school, and went back to California. But as soon as I graduated, my folks knew I was going to leave because I was going to tell you, Julian Hayes called me in there about 2 months before school was out. And he said, man, I just want to tell you something. He said, we have never liked Arkansas since we've been here. He said, we're New Yorkers. We can't get that out of our blood. He said, I've sold the station. And he said, we're going to be moving back to New York. And he said, they know about you. They've heard your program. And they think they'll probably want to keep you. But he said, I can't guarantee they will. When they buy it, it'll be theirs. And they were going to take over like 2 months after school was going to be out. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, what I'm going to do when Julian leaves, I'll leave.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to California. So my graduation present from my mom and dad, they raked and scraped and bought me the biggest Samsonite suitcase they made at that time. And when I graduated, I had $140 and I bought me a bus ticket. And I took that Gibson guitar and an amplifier and a lap steel. It was a silver tone that I'd bought from Sears Roebuck. And I got me a Greyhound bus station ticket and I headed California. And that was in 1953. So I wound up, got drafted in the Marine Corps in 1957. But in 54 and 55, I was playing. I played at Knott's Berry Farm, and I played on a program called Cal's Corral. There was a guy named Cal Worthington. These guys started saying all the good guys wear white hats. He was a Dodge dealer and a Ford dealer in L.A. Had this program on KTTV, which was Channel 5. And you got to be really old to remember that. And most people that I know today are not. But anyway, I got a job playing the guitar on that program. And I made $12, so it wasn't for the money.
Right.
Because I had a job that was paying me a lot more than that. But I met everybody from the Grand Ole Opry, everybody from California that played music and were professionals. They were guests on his show. It was a pretty big show, pretty good show. And he had a lot of popularity. He'd get his suits at nudies, and he wasn't rhinestone, but he had pinstriping around the little moon pockets. We used to call them, have little airs at the end of them. He'd wear a white suit, white hat, red necktie, red sharp-toed cowboy boots. He'd come out to banging on the hood of them cars and do his own commercials.
Right.
But he'd come out and one day he'd come out leading about a 4-foot alligator on a leash. He'd come out with a bobcat or a monkey. Chimpanzee was my favorite. But he was, everybody thought he was about half crazy, but he's just smart as a whip, and he knew how to get your attention. And if he walks out with an alligator, you're going to listen to what he says.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's about a car, you know.
You don't want to know what he says just because he's got an alligator.
That's the whole thing, and that's why he done it. He knew that.
Right.
But anyway, Johnny Cash was a guest on that program the first time I ever met him. Lefty Frizzell was a guest on that program the first time I ever met him. Wound up being a good casual type friend with him before he passed away here in Hendersonville, because he lived just a few blocks from us. And of course, I met his brother David, and he's one of our best friends now, Alan.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all great folks. So I knew that whole Frizzell family because I met Lefty to start with, was impressed with him, and wound up wanting to meet the rest of them. But I never set out to meet people, but I worked for a glass company in California when I first went out there. And I put glass and mirrors in people's houses. And I put all the glass and mirrors in a Richard Nixon house in Trousdale Estates. I put glass in Liberace's house. I put mirrors in Liberace's house, and his brother George built a new house in Encino, California. I put all the glass and mirrors in that house, and I made some glass tabletops for Dinah Shore's husband, he was a movie actor too. He was a cowboy actor.
Right.
George Montgomery was his name. But he made tables and stuff like that. And he had only one piece of glass on. I made it for him, but I was cutting a mirror out when he walked in there because somebody told me there was no way you could cut a mirror out of a flat piece of glass. And it just happened. I was working on a piece of broken mirror. And I was cutting out hard, and I figured out how to do it. And George came in there, and I didn't know him from Adam. Coming there with a piece of driftwood he picked up off the beach. He cut the top of it off even, the bottom of it off even, where it's set flat. He wanted me to cut a piece of freeform glass, make a coffee table out of it. And so I did, and he said, I'd like to buy that heart-shaped mirror. And I said, oh man, I'm right through it. I hadn't even polished it yet. I just figured out how to cut it. He wanted me to sell it to him like it was. He said, my wife's crazy about hearts. And he said, I'd like to take that home and give it to her. And so I just said, shoot, you can have it. And I said, let me polish the edge of it so you don't cut your hand. I polished it a little bit, gave it to him. He calls me back. He said, she wants 8 more of them. So I wound up, I made 9 mirrors for Dinah Shore.
Yeah, and Dinah Shore's from Winchester, Tennessee.
Oh yeah, and you know, the first place she ever sung was in on the Donahoe Hotel, Ronnie McDowell.
Yeah, Red Boiling Springs.
Red Boiling Springs. I couldn't think of the name of the place. I go there all the time. I just couldn't remember the name of it. But she first sung her first
song.
Gig.
That's an old hotel.
That old hotel up there. Yeah, that's 100-something years old.
Yeah.
But anyway, I have met all kinds of folks, and then I got drafted in the Marine Corps in 1957, and then in '62, I was still playing out there, and I was singing in a gospel quartet called Songfellows, and it was an old Southern gospel quartet, and California didn't have a lot of them, but Songfellows was the hottest one out there. And I met all these quartet people come out there, and we'd work up and down the coast with them. Right. And everybody kept telling me, man, you need to be in Nashville. You're a pretty good guitar picker. You're a good singer. And you can really do good in Nashville. And I got to believe in that crap after a while, you know. My wife was working in a bank, and I talked her into believing that she ought to quit that job at the bank, and I ought to quit singing with Songfellows Quartet. We need to load up our belongings in a U-Haul trailer and move to Nashville. So we did that. And I got here and I found out I wasn't really what they was waiting on. Everybody said, man, you too fat. There ain't no fat country singer. And at that time there wasn't. So I wound up, I did get a job. I sold cars for a while, sold beauty supplies for a while. I didn't feel like I was called to do that kind of work. And I got a job. I was the first one that John T. Benson hired to work at Heartwarming Records, and gospel people know that label. It turned out to be the biggest gospel label going by the time he
Right.
passed away. But I worked for him for about 2.5 years, and it's kind of funny how that happened. He was located then in Nashville, where the building they call the Bat Building now is.
Right.
And they had a building there, him and his two brothers, and they printed high school annuals
Right.
and textbooks and stuff like that there. And it was a 4-story building, and John T. Had got one of the floors, and he started publishing sheet music and songbooks, hymnals, church hymnals, and he done that separate from the rest of the brothers. They had Benson Printing together,
Right.
and he had Benson Publishing Company was his operation. And he walked in the bank one day, and my wife waited on him, and while she was waiting on him, they brought her name tag and put it in front of her. And he was standing there, and he looked at it, and he said, "Gene Jackson." He said, "You're new here, aren't you, Gene Jackson?" And she said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I can tell you're not from around here because you don't have our accent." And he said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Well, I was born in El Dorado, Arkansas. That's right on the Louisiana state line." And she said, "I lived in California for the last 6 years, and we just moved here." And he said, "What brings you here from California?" And she said, "My husband is a guitar player, and he's a singer, and he came here to get closer to the music business." And he said, what kind of singing did he do in California?" And she said, "He was a gospel singer." And he said, "Oh, that's my line of business." He said, "Who did he sing with out there?" And she said, "He sung in a quartet." And he said it was Bob Jones and Songfellow's Quartet. And she said, "Oh, John T. just lit up." And he said, "I knew Bob Jones when he sung with the Earl Weatherford Quartet in Akron, Ohio. I knew Bob Jones when he sung with the Statesman Quartet in Atlanta, Georgia. I knew Bob Jones when he moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and started the Songfellows Quartet. I knew Bob Jones when he moved the Songfellows Quartet to Los Angeles, California." And he said, "Your husband know anything about running a record label?" And she said, "No, he's never done that, but he's a fast learner." And he said, "Tell him to come down here and see me in the morning at 10 o'clock. And he said, "I'm right down the street on the left. It's Benson Printing, going that front door on 4th Avenue. And tell him you're there to see John T. Benson." So when she got home that night, she told me about it, and I was tickled to death because we sung out his songbooks.
Right.
Songs of Inspiration was big. He had 8 of them. And then he had regular church hymnals too. But sheet music is the biggest printer of religious sheet music in the world at that time. But he wanted to start a record label that was legitimate, as he said it. He said, "There's some in town," but he said, "they're ripping them people off, and they're not making any money. They don't get royalties." He said, "Anything that's made, the record label's getting it. I'm going to start a legitimate record label for nothing but gospel singers." And he said, "I need somebody to head that thing up." So she told me all what he had said. Of course, I knew who he was. I never met him. So I walk in down there the next morning, and that was in the period of time where I was selling cars at Coggin Chevrolet, which was at the foot of the Woodland Street Bridge where Titan Stadium is now. And so anyhow, I went and walked in there, and there was 2 things, and there was a desk close to the door. Back across the room, and there's a big old room, there's another desk with one 4-drawer filing cabinet, and a little white-haired lady, old lady, sitting there with that hair about that high on her head. And that was all that was in that room. So I walk in, the woman close to the door, she said, "You Jay Jackson?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I could hear a piano playing in the room next to it. And she said, she pointed to that door, and she said, "He's in that room. He'll be waiting for you. Just go on in there." So I walk over and I knock on the door. And she said, "Just go on in. He's waiting on you." And I thought, well, John T. plays the piano.
Right.
And I walk in, I open the door. There's a little spinning piano. There's a guy sitting there playing piano. And there's a couch in there, and there's an old man laying on the couch with his feet on the arm of it on the other end. And he's sound asleep. There's one other chair in there, like we're sitting in. That's all. no desk or nothing, wasn't an office. And there was just sleeping room and a piano playing room, looked like. So since the only one awake was the guy playing the piano, I just kind of turned around at him and said, "Sir, are you Mr. Benson?" And then he answered me, just pointed over his shoulder, the guy laying there asleep. And I said, "Well, he's asleep." And he said, "Yeah, he always goes to sleep every time he comes in here and lays down." He said, "You shake his foot and you'll wake him up." Now, this is a job interview I'm there on, you know. He's telling me to shake that man's foot and wake him up. He's laying there on that couch like this. And so I took his foot real gentle, kind of moved his foot a little bit, and he kind of jumped a little bit, and he didn't move. He kept that same position. He said, "Jay boy." And I thought that guy playing piano must be named Jay too. Because he acted like he was looking at him. And I didn't answer, neither did the piano player. And so he said, he's still laying there like that. And he said, "Hello." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, "You speaking to me?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "We get this little business out of." He said, "I don't guess your beautiful wife told you, but," he said, "when I was born, I had a problem with my eyes." He said, "I look one way, but I see another." He said, "I'm looking straight at you." He was like this. And he said, "My eyes are crossed." And I don't know how that struck me, but I didn't know what to say. And I didn't know whether to say, "I'm sorry," or address that, or just go on and talk about something else. So anyway, I said, "Man, I'm sorry to hear that." And I said, "I just didn't realize you were speaking to me." And I said, "I thought you were speaking to the man playing the piano." He never did acknowledge us until later in the conversation when John T. had already hired me. And he said, I'll pay you. He told me, he said, "I'll pay you $60 a week salary. I'll pay you car." He asked me if I had a car. And I said, "Yes, sir, I have." And he said, "Is it a nice car?" And I said, "It's a sedan DeVille Cadillac." And he said, "A nice model?" And I said, "Yes, sir, it's a 61. And he said, "Have you got a payment on that car?" And I said, "Yes, sir, $141 a month." And I said, 60 a week probably ain't gonna happen. and and anyway, he said, "Well, we'll talk about that." But he said, now this was in 1962 or early 3. And so $60 a week was pretty much going right around here for a lot of jobs. But anyway, he said, "Well, we'll have to use your car. You're gonna have a lot of traveling to do. You're gonna have to go to a lot of quartet singings. We want to get some people on the label." He kind of outlined what he wanted to do. He said, I want the label to be called Heartwarming Records." And I used to do some artwork. I've done pen and ink drawings and watercolors and stuff since I was a kid. And I had a pad in my pocket and I took it out and I just drew two hearts kind of overlapping. And I put Heartwarming on the top. And then I put records down below that. I said, "Is that what you're talking about?" He said, "That's it exactly." He said, "That'll be our logo." So we're off to a big start already. We done developed a logo and a name for the company. He's talking about me working there. And Elmo's still playing the piano, the guy playing the piano. Turned out to be Elmo Mercer. Yeah. Big songwriter, Elvis on Downs recorded his songs. And he wrote a few country songs, but he was mostly exclusive gospel. And he worked for Benson for 10 years. And when John T. said, "I'll pay your car payment, pay all your car expenses. I'll give you an unlimited expense account because you're going to have to take a few radio people out to eat. You're going to have to, spend a little bit of money." Yeah. So he said, "You'll have an unlimited expense account." So the guy at the piano stops playing. He turns around for the first time. He said, "Mr. Benson," he said, "I've been with you for 10 years. And he said, I make $70 a week. I've never heard of an expense account unlimited and making somebody's car payment." So John T., he's still sitting there and he turns his head where he's looking toward Elmo. And he said, "Elmo, I'd like to suggest that you take a look at your royalty sheets.
Yeah. So get your royalties.
And he said, you got paid in other ways.
Yeah.
He said, I'll try to take care of you. But he said, this is between me and Jay Jackson.
That's
He said, you go ahead and finish arranging that song. And if you can get it published and get somebody to record it, you'll make some money off what you're doing right now.
that's true.
And so Elmo resented me for a while. I worked for Benson. The first year and a half, I was the only employee at Heartwarming Records. And shoot, we had all kinds of people signing up, and he wound up with name brand artists on his label. And it wound up being the biggest gospel recording company in the business, and he sold out. The boys, after he passed away, had 2 sons and a daughter, and they sold that company for a big chunk of money. And I was tickled to death to look back and see something that, and you know, I never thought about going to a record label or a publisher come try to get a job on a record label. I mean, somehow or another, and I think it's divine guidance.
There had to be.
You can call it anything you want to. You can say I'm the luckiest guy in the world, and I might be, but I lost several $1,000s in Tunica, Mississippi, playing slot machines. So I wasn't the luckiest guy in the world. I think I was put where I ought to be when I should have been there.
I think that's the way it looks. And he's out of it. But I met Bob one time. Him and Nick
Bruno.
over at some church over here. We were going to do a concert. We did a concert with somebody over there. I don't remember, but we had talked a few times.
I see. Now that Bob, he just died,
Okay.
and he was the son, Bob Jones, that John T. Benson knew was
Right.
his dad.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there's 2 of them. So he was Bobby when I sung with him,
Okay.
and he had just gotten married. He graduated from school, went to college, and got married. And he had just started with a quartet just before I did.
Okay.
And so I did sing with him out there. Then, this is a funny twist too. Later, years later, Bob and his daddy had a music store in Monrovia, California, when I was singing with him. And Bob and Bobby ran that store, and they had a couple other people that worked for them full time too. In fact, I taught guitar lessons in there for a while. Crap, I don't know about teaching guitar lessons.
It's just a small world.
It is.
You know.
But anyway, they had that music store, and Bobby, they sold the store, but Bobby had an offer from Thomas Organ Company to come to work for them. It was really a big offer.
No.
So he went to work for them. Then he worked for them for several years. Then Steinway offered him a job as the vice president of Steinway. So he was vice president of Steinway Piano Company for about 12 years.
Okay.
Then, somehow or another, John T. Benson sold the publishing company, and his boys had sold the record label, the whole shooting match, to Zondervan or one of them big outfits.
Right.
And they hired Bob Jones to come here and be the general manager of Heartwarming Records.
Okay.
And that's crazy that I sung with him when he was 19 years old, and just getting married and all that kind of stuff. And then I moved here. I didn't never know he was here.
Right.
I was in the restaurant business by then.
And then he ends up being the president of the label that you were the first one to run.
Yeah. And then he went to work for Samick. He was the head knocker for Samick America. And he done really good. And he passed away just, like I said, a couple of months ago.
There's one story, and I don't know really where this would fall into the history line, but there's one story that I've just never forgotten. That we're going back to real quick to Johnny Cash. You were telling the story one time about, I don't know if it was you or your wife or somebody was sick, but that people did not realize how
when he went to the hospital to pray for him.
How Johnny was actually religious, even in his wilder days.
He was super. Even when he was on those drugs, he read the Bible every day. he kept a Bible by every position he's occupied in his house, by the bed, by the easy chair, dining room table, and he had a pair of glasses laying on every one of them Bibles. So he didn't have to go chase another Bible. He just picked one up wherever he was sitting. And he was super religious. In fact, they went to my brother's church, and my brother built a church in Hendersonville, Assembly of God Church. And then he wound up, my dad never owned a house. He never had a new car, and my wife and I bought him one. And they wound up, when he resigned, his last church was in Camden, Tennessee. It was the only church he ever took where he had a salary. And when he took that church, he was like 65 or something like that. He stayed there 9 years, and he was 75 when he resigned. So then, something like that when he took that church. So he should have been retired by the time he got his first salary at church. It was $100 a week. And anyway, he pastored that church for 9 years. And my mother had cancer, so he resigned. And we bought him a house trailer and put it on the lake over here. And then she had to go in a wheelchair, and the house trailer we bought him wasn't big enough to roll a wheelchair down the hallway, so we bought the biggest one we could get. And I mean, that was their home when they died, but it was a nice big, both those house trailers were nice, nicest places they ever lived. And, but he didn't care. I mean, he'd done his ministry, and he felt like he'd done what he was supposed to do. I feel like he did too, even though I didn't like it. It was uncomfortable for us.
Right.
I changed schools 16 times before graduating high school. And my brother Gene, he got halfway through the 11th grade. And we were sitting there eating dinner one night, and he looks at my dad and he said, "I don't know how you feel about this deal," but he said, "I'll tell you what I want to do." He said, "I want to quit school right now." He said, "I'm tired of moving around." He was real quiet and never said anything. Everybody thought I'd be a preacher because I just want to talk. Gene never said nothing. If you came in the house like y'all came in here today, he would get him a book and he'd sit over and read. I mean, he'd say hi to you.
Right.
And then he'd say goodbye when you left.
Right.
He wasn't interested in sitting there shooting the breeze with you. He didn't care what you done yesterday or what you gonna do tomorrow. He
just read.
He wasn't wanting to mess with people.
Right.
He just sat there and read the whole time he was there. And I never read a book in school. I'd have Gene read them. I'd read the fly covers. I'd give a book report and hit and miss, and he hoped to hit enough of it I'd pass. And I did. I got caught once or twice. They said, "You didn't really read that book, did you?" And I said, "I read most of it. I might have skipped some of it." But I mean, I'd have him read a book. He could read a book that thick in about 2 hours and tell you what he said. And so he was blessed in a lot of ways. But he quit school and he went back to California, worked in the lumber yard, and took accordion lessons. He could play an accordion like Lawrence Welk. And he could play guitar. He could play a 5-string banjo. And I played steel guitar on lap steel, and I played the guitar. And my dad wanted us to learn to play the piano because they didn't have piano players in the churches. I could play in 3 keys, and Gene could play in 3. We taught ourselves. And we had this girl that could play piano, and she showed us, like, this will be a chord if you do this.
Right.
Place your fingers there and push that down. That'll be a chord. And so we took that information she gave us, and I learned to play on white keys, and he learned to play on buttons. And we sat at the front bench close to the piano. And they said, "Turn number 35 in your hymn book. We're going to sing Power and Blood." And whichever one of us could play the key closest to it, jump up there and play it on the piano. And I mean, we never were piano players, but he was. He got really good on the piano. I didn't care much about playing the piano. I was into the guitar.
Right.
And I got to where I was a pretty good guitar player, but I can't play it all now. My fingers are numb. You play by feeling. You shoot, you can't play. You don't know if you're pressing them down far enough.
Right. Right. But I heard you play here a couple of years ago, and I thought it was pretty good myself.
Well, I let those guys talk me into it. That one guy, he's a preacher from Dayton, Ohio. They come down and spend some time with us. And he said, "Man, just get one of them guitars. I've always got a guitar sitting there." He said, get one of those guitars and let's just play a little bit. And I said, man, my finger's so stiff. My finger's so stiff you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Like that finger's what they call a trigger finger. Like I didn't do that.
Yeah. It just does. It just closes.
And it'll open, man. I'm trying to open it right now. And it hurts like crazy.
Yeah.
But it'll open.
Mm.
And so I can't play anymore. And that really bugs me. I'm